Hello, I'm going to use this video to show you guys how I create a heel on my Bear Valley CSM. I have already made one of the socks for this set, and I went ahead and detached it and seamed it together so that you guys would have an example for this video. So I did a 30-row hung hem for the cuff. I did 45 rows for the leg. I turned a heel. Then I've got a 60-row foot and my toe, which I Kitchenered together at the end of the project. So nice and finished sock off the machine. The only thing I had to sew was that Kitchener stitch on the toe, and then just hiding my initial thread inside the sock. So the sock for the heel, I have marked on my machine the start of the round, my increase and decrease lines of where I want the heel to end, as well as the midpoint on my sock machine. So we're going to start here and decrease down, and then we're going to start increasing at this point. So you do get a little bit of a line where that is. I honestly have never felt it or noticed it when wearing them. My socks are super cozy and I've never had a problem. So I think this is probably, gosh, my 20 plus pair of socks for this. So definitely get use out of this machine. I love it. So let's get on to the heels. So the first thing I'm going to do is lift up half of my stitches out of service. So I'm going to go ahead and use my tool in here and lift these up, crank forward a little bit, lift the rest of these stitches out. So all the needles that I have just lifted up will not knit now. So they're out of service. So when I crank forward the rest of this row, you'll hear it loses all the tension and it won't wrap around any of the needles. So that function happens with the cam. So when you lift these up, you'll want them all above this cam line. If any of them stay below it, it will drop below and then knit the stitch. So if you end up with any issues with that, that's a good place to look. So the first thing that we're going to do is the decrease rounds. So we're going to lift up a stitch after the knit on each side as we go. So we'll knit back and forth to create the decrease. So the first thing I'm going to do is lift up this last stitch that was knit. And you can tell like where your cam is on the other side of this machine, because you won't be able to lift this up all the way if you haven't gotten past that point. So now the yarn, the working yarn, stays in between this stitch that I just raised and the first unused stitch. So when I go back through, what's going to happen is now it's wrapping around this needle. Also, I'd like to say that this guy in the background is Link, and he is my little helper around here. So, hi, Link. So we got to cross this first round. I'm going to lift up the last knit stitch on this side for a wrap. And at this point in the project, I am going to go ahead and add in my heel forks. I bought mine from Dean & Bean. I really like these heel forks. They work really well on this machine. They have a nice weight to them, so they're definitely helpful. So I have 3 of these, so I'm going to go ahead and hang one right in the middle here. I'm going to hang the other 2 kind of in the middle of that and the last stitch. So what's going to happen as we knit on the project is they're going to move and the yarn isn't gonna get pulled down as much. So you're gonna have to scoot them up in order to keep the weight on the project, which is maybe like 2 or 3 times for a pair of socks, or a sock. Go ahead and continue on. You can use a tool to lift them up, or you can just use your hand, whatever makes you the most comfortable. It is a little bit pokey if you stick your finger under this hook, so. So I'm going to go back and forth, lifting one needle at a time until I reach my light purple points on here. Another thing I'd like to know, and I try to mention this in my other videos, this mark right here is where the cam starts. So when I come across the round, I know where to start. For things like a hung hem, for lifting my stitches, it's just helpful for me. It's like a little hard to see into the machine sometimes. So you can see that my heel forks are starting to drop down pretty low in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and give them a little lift and then bring them inwards a little bit. I can tell that that was getting a little bit loose, so I'm going to go ahead and... one way to tell that it's getting loose is the stitches won't pull all the way down, so you can kind of get hung up on there and lose stitches. So that's one of the reasons you're going to want to kind of pay attention to your weights. Make sure that you're not losing anybody. It's less of a problem when you're increasing than it is when you're decreasing on a heel. Okay, so I got one more stitch after this, and we will start increasing. Okay, so I've got all these guys are knit now. So it's a little bit hard to show with the angle of the camera. When I get to the other side, I will try and zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So the first round that we do back and forth, we're going to knit the first 2 stitches as an increase. And then after that, we're going to knit a single stitch until the final stitch. So we're going to go ahead and lift up your working yarn in between the 2 needles. So you'll see it's right in here and it's behind the stitch. Now on your needles, you'll have a wrap stitch and then your working stitch from the previous round. So what we're going to do to drop these stitches down and create that increase is grab that wrap stitch and leave on the live stitch in here and push down your needle so that the live stitch will be underneath the lever mechanism, but the wrapped yarn is going to go in between the lever and the hook. So we have to do that on both stitches. That. Okay. So as I crank back this way, those 2 stitches just knit. So then they'll pass through one more time, and they will knit singly as the rest of these stitches will. All right, so bear with me. I'm going to bring this down and zoom in a bit for you to give you some different perspective on how this looks. So again, this side as well, you're going to do 2 on the first and then a single until the last. So I wrapped this yarn behind. I'm going to turn this needle so that the leg is pointing straight down. I'm going to pull that needle forward a little bit because it's a little easier to grab into the wrap stitch. But as you can see inside here, there's still a stitch on the needle. So I'm going to push this down. And when I push it down, I have a knit stitch underneath the lever and then my wrap stitch between that hook and lever. So I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to pull that forward, push this down, make sure we get the lever in the middle. Beautiful. And I'm going to go back this way. 1, 2. So those 2 clicks just indicated that those stitches knit. And now we're going to keep going. I try to keep an eye on this yarn and make sure it stays in between there so it does knit on all of the stitches. Beautiful. So we did our first 2 wrap stitches. I'm going to keep going until I get to those final stitches. Again, 1 stitch at a time. So wrap stitch in between the lever, live stitch below it, and crank. I'm going to probably recreate these videos as I go and learn. YouTube and camera skills are all new for me, so pardon the dust, if you will. Scooch this in a little bit so you can see a little more. There's a lot of really good resources out there that will help you calculate how deep the heel is for your sock, depending on how many needles are on your cylinder and how you like to wear them. It's definitely something you can play with a little bit. I have made socks for a good handful of people right in my life, and I have different cylinders marked at different depths depending on the size of the sock. So grab an example. This is another cylinder of mine, and it has different marks on it. All right, keep working on this one. So you can see on the cylinder right now, you can see the line on the inside, what it looks like. But once you pull it off there, it's really very minimal. Okay, so this is my last stitch before I have one left on this side. So we're gonna knit this one. And this is the last stitch on this side. So this is where we're gonna go ahead and keep cranking the right direction. So I'm gonna stop here before this stitch goes past, and I'm gonna do the wrap method for this last one, but I'm also gonna continue pulling these out of service needles down. So you do have to kind of pull the yarn forward, make sure that it goes between the hook and lever now. And we're going to make sure we get all these needles back down into action, because we're going to start knitting in the round again after those heel rows are done. Okay, so this is the last stitch with a wrap around it. So we're going to pull the wrap stitch in between the lever, and then the live stitch is going to go below it. And it's the last time we'll have to do that on this sock. So we'll crank around to the start of the row. And we're going to reset our counter, and this is where we will start the foot. So for my sock, I did 60 rows. Because I did this kind of like dip toe on this particular sock, I did 50 rows and then did just 10 in this orange color. And the toe is actually the same technique as the heel is. The only difference is at the end of this, you'll do 2 rounds of the entire cylinder, and then you'll do a couple inches of waste yarn to get it off of the machine and give yourself something to hold those stitches live until you do a Kitchener stitch to finish it. Hopefully this helped with learning how to do some heels. I am hoping to create some more videos in the future that will get even further into this process.